What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy TreJuanJohnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Always feel free to comment. Just make sure you keep those comments respectful. And if you're interested in supporting your favorite podcast, yours truly, I got my Cash App in the episode description. Appreciate all the support. Um, Also, before we get started, just want to announce going into the new year, got a little goal. I think last time I looked, I had about 30 something subscribers, and maybe you could do better than that, right? And so I want to start small. I want to try to get that number over 100. Um, we have 3 weeks left in 2024. I would love to get 100 by then. So make sure not only do y'all like and subscribe to the channel, but share it with your friends, your family, anyone that's interested in sports podcasts. And this is one of the best ones, at least in my opinion. Maybe a little bit biased, but appreciate all the love and support, man. And the more you guys can share and get the word out about the No Disrespect But podcast, um, I think would be great. I appreciate it, and I think with the message that I'm trying to put out and how we have this sports discourse to a degree is something that a lot of people need to see. So the more you guys keep sharing, the more information I get. I know how well I'm doing, but also what the people want to hear. And so also free to put that in the comments too. Whatever topics you guys want me to focus on a particular episode. Always open to having guests as well, and as I said, anybody who's ever been a guest on this show, when you're a guest, this is your show. I'm the guest. I'm just here. We'll talk about what you want to talk about. I'll be a listening ear. I'll put my input where I need to be, where I need to put it in. But just love having folks on the show that can talk about their area or something that they're interested in. So we're going to be trying to kick that off a little bit more in the new year as well. And then I'll be remiss if I didn't say on every Wednesday, you got to catch your boy on the Bayou Ballers podcast. We actually went over 1,000 subscribers on that one. So definitely getting a lot of love there. My boy Tay Visuals. And, we talk all things NBA, NFL. So give us a listen. We usually go live on Twitter and YouTube every Wednesday. So check us there, Bayou Ballers podcast. Okay. So there are enough things I want to talk about, man. And obviously I gotta start with the elephant in the room, or should I say the elephant that is not in the room anymore, and that being Alabama no longer being in the college football playoff. Now, when you get in the who's most deserving and that type of thing, look, Alabama had 3 losses. SMU had 2, including one in the conference championship. I know what the resume says and things like that, but it's hard when you have 3 losses and you don't make it to your conference championship game when you had that within arm's reach. All you had to do was beat Oklahoma at that point in time and obviously finish the year beating Auburn, and you're in your conference championship. And even if you lose, you more than likely keep a spot in it, because the committee did stay true to the most part, saying they wouldn't penalize conference championship participants, even though you put SMU above Clemson. So somehow we still ended up devaluing the conference championship, and not to mention Oregon getting a worse bracket, winning the Big Ten championship than their opponent, Penn State. So there's a lot to be said about that. But here's the thing. I, as an Alabama fan, I think the guys in that locker room, you wanted them to be able to play for a national championship. And to be quite honest, you had 12 weeks to play for a national championship and just didn't do enough in that time. But really grateful for the guys that stayed when Coach Saban obviously retired, and allowed Coach DeBoer to come in and lead this program and kind of implement his some of his own values into the program. And I think going forward, you'll see that a lot more, especially as he gets some of his guys in the fold. And so I'm excited to see what the future holds for Alabama, but really happy for guys like Jalen Milroe, Malachi Moore, obviously Tyler Booker, guys that may be able have a chance to play at the next level. So we'll see what's in the cards for them. So really looking forward to that. But it is what it is. And we'll get into the college football playoff going into next week because that's when it actually officially starts. So we'll do that then. But just had to kind of uh, get the cat out of the bag, attack the elephant in the room, or like I said, the elephant that is no longer in the room. And it'll be better luck next year for my Crimson Tide, but it's always Roll Tide around this way. But staying in the college realm, obviously the portal has opened. You're seeing coaches getting hired as well, which is kind of important. You want to get your coaches hired as fast as you can. So that way you can kind of keep guys from going in the portal, be able to recruit guys that are in the portal, and obviously try to keep your high school commits committed to your university and your football program. Um, Man, and one of the things I just wanted to touch on is, and kind of get on my soapbox for a second, is I really just hate the collegiate schedule. I really do. Um, Especially when we think about the playoff expansion and how the season is going to be lasting a lot longer for at this point 12 programs, right? Who are vying for a national championship. And obviously you'll have other programs that are vying for a bowl win and a fantastic finish to their season. Even though it might not have gone the way they wanted it, depending on what the program is. But you're seeing a lot of guys transfer that are on one of these 12 teams and trying to look for new homes, and kind of having some conversations back and forth. It was, why would you leave if your team is competing for a national championship, right? In days past, even when guys transferred and kind of early on when the transfer portal started to have a little bit more leeway, you would see guys stay throughout the rest of the season and then leave. Same can be said for coaches, even especially coordinators that got hired elsewhere. You would see there was more opportunities and more guys saying, you know what, yeah, I got this new job, but I want to finish what I started. Because some of these guys on the team, they're guys I recruited heavily. I coached them all year, or in some cases for years. I love these guys, love these young men, and I want to go out and finish strong with them. Um, and as the window, if it felt like it started to tighten, you started to see that the decision making in a way is almost rushed. When we think about the number of kids that enter the transfer portal nowadays and the percentages where not many of them find a home, I think part of that is because these guys are having to forego their athletic scholarship at one institution for one way or another. It's not always centered around money. Sometimes it's about playing time. Sometimes it's about proximity to home. We saw a wide receiver for the University of North Carolina last season where his grandmother was ill and he wanted to be closer to home. It wasn't anything about the money. It wasn't anything about, I'm not getting enough playing time here, or I'm not being used right. My family needs me and I need to be close to home because anything can happen and I don't want to be far away and not have an opportunity to spend as much time with my loved one as I could. So there's a lot of different circumstances that play a part in why, and I'm just talking strictly football here right now, why a young man enters the transfer portal. And I think one of the main reasons is, when you think about the time, is if I wait until the end of the year, let's say I am a recruit or I'm a player for Texas or I'm a player for UGA and we make it all the way to the national championship. Now I'm waiting until mid-January after national title game and now have to decide what I'm going to do. Well, there's some issues there. A lot of other people who didn't make it to the playoffs, those guys hopped in the portal. They found their team that they wanted to go to. Universities were able to find some guys at certain positions, and football programs were able to find guys at certain positions, whether that be the JUCO route or FCS moving up, or maybe some guys in the FBS programs want another opportunity as well. And the spots are filling up. And when you think about the roster cuts, I think they're going to be getting cut to 105. There's even less and less uh, room in these football programs. And so if I wait to January, I've missed out on a great opportunity from an athletic standpoint to have an opportunity to play with another team and improve my stock wherever that might be. But what doesn't get talked a lot about is the academic aspect of it. When you get to January 20th and things like that, we're kind of really getting started with the spring semester. And classes have already been scheduled. And you got your syllabus, and we're starting to get some things rocking and rolling. And I know we assume that every institution, especially one with athletics programs, that they're just passing the athletes through. But in some institutions, and I would argue that most institutions, we do value the student and student athlete. And if you're a student athlete and you're thinking about transferring and you've waited so long to transfer, like we're talking about you're fitting in a football program. I know that's kind of the surface level is what people like to talk about, right? But do I even have time? Like, here's the thing. I waited to January. Do I need to make my decision in a week? Is that enough time for me to think about my academic programs? And if the classes I've already taken at this place, if they transfer over, do they even have the degree plan that I want? We saw, is it Grayson? This I can't remember his last name. That played for Coastal Carolina. He was the quarterback for a long time, and he wanted to transfer to Auburn. Auburn didn't have his program, so he ended up staying at Coastal Carolina for another year. Didn't end up going to North Carolina State, and ultimately retired for medical reasons. But that was an instance that, and I was glad in a way that was highlighted because those things happen. Not every institution has your degree program that you're in. Not every institution accepts the courses and the credits from one institution to the next. And so that's why, I'm not upset. Someone posed the question and said, hey, like, do you feel some type of way? Like if a guy leaves while his team is on their way competing for a national championship, do you still want that player, or do you think it's something some red flag about him? Those are just the two options. And knowing her, I don't believe she thinks it's a red flag. But my response was no. I don't think it's a red flag. I support it because the spots are filling up and they have to take advantage right now as best as they can. And do I know? And yes, I know that some of these guys have been tampered with all season. They've already known what places they're going to go. But again, a lot of that is due to the schedule because, again, do they have the time? Once I announce I'm going to the transfer portal, do I have the time to now try to look for a new home and essentially only have a few weeks to find it, get my affairs in order in terms, especially if I'm moving cross country or whatever it may be. Gotta get my affairs in order on how I'm gonna get there. I gotta think about what my courses are gonna be. How do I get that scheduled? Sure, most institutions have somebody that can do that for them, and but if you have kids that really take that stuff seriously and want to make sure they're putting themselves in the best position, not just to play football at the next level, but to have a career in whatever they choose to pursue once they graduate. Those things matter. And so I have no issue regarding young athletes, young student athletes that want to hop in the portal as early as they can, or essentially having the conversations with other programs about, hey, if I do hop in the portal, what does it look like for me? I mean, yes, money's part of the conversation now in the NIL packages, but you know, what is that? What is the programming around? How are you going to build your offense, or how do I fit in your system and what you're trying to do? If you're the coach that recruiting me, what is your job security looking like? Are you looking at other places? Because that's important too. And so I want to segue to coaches as well, because this is some of the earliest times I've seen coaches getting hired in college football. You see Gus Malzahn, who's the head coach at UCF, literally after the season is over, says, "Hey, I'm going to be the offense coordinator at Florida State." We can only imagine how long Florida State had been courting him and saying, "Hey, man, like offense isn't looking so good here with us. We'd love, if the opportunity presents itself, we'd love to have you at Florida State University." Like how early in the season had Gus decided that, hey, when this is over, whether we have a good year or a bad year, which they had a bad year this year, um, when was the decision made that he was going to leave and take a coordinator position? How did that affect recruiting to UCF? Did he go as hard? Did he kind of tell his lead recruiters, hey, maybe maybe back off of this guy, or tell this guy we got to rescind his offer because I want this guy at Florida State, pretty much. So what were those conversations? And while it sucks, especially for the players that are committed to the program and that are committed to these coaching staffs, as a coach in this landscape, you have to also be thinking about transfer portal windows and high school recruiting and commitment and signing days, and that I need to be in a position so that I can make sure I keep the guys that are on the roster, that I can make sure that there are guys in the portal that we can go after, that we already know the plan from the athletic administration, the university administration, the boosters. How are we going to do this? Um, those are things that unfortunately you end up having conversations throughout the year. And I can't necessarily prove, I don't have, recordings or things, but again, I would say the proof is in the pudding, right? Um, Again, when a guy takes a job literally hours after their last game, or you see a coach opening getting filled when they just fired their coach 2.5 weeks ago. I mean, you kind of connect the dots there, and so it sucks all around. And I wish we can kind of go back to a period where just kind of push things back a little bit, to where there's not so much pressure on the student athletes, obviously. Also, so we're kind of reducing a little bit of pressure on coaches and, dare I say, universities, and athletic administrations, because you want to field competitive programs, and you have to be in a position where you know who your guy or your girl is going to be in terms of leading your program. And if you're behind the eight ball and you're bringing a coach in late in the year and you're losing recruits and you're losing players currently on your roster to the transfer portal, it's going to be somewhat of a difficult task that first season. And obviously, you have the spring window, maybe you can get some folks in there, but it's going to be hard maybe the first year or two. You have to give that coach some grace, understanding what they're walking into. That could be said for Coach DeBoer and what he walked into with Coach Saban retiring in January, because his team went to the semifinals in the college football playoffs. So they played a little bit later. And so you had guys that on signing day had committed to Alabama thinking they were going to play for Coach Nick Saban. They realized, oh, he's not the coach anymore. Now I need to, rescind my letter of intent, my NLI, and I need to figure out what program I'm joining. And we're talking about some guys that had enrolled early at the University of Alabama, and that happens all over the country. So what is it? So what pathway? What are some options where we can just make the scheduling and the timing and just the critical decision making a lot easier, not just for the coaches and their families and things like that, but really the young men in these football programs that are trying to figure out what they're doing with their lives. And we shouldn't have these decisions getting rushed, especially when we know so many kids aren't finding a home with the transfer portal. We got to have a better process, and I'm looking forward, and I'd be willing to work with anyone on the NCAA side. Obviously, I work in college athletics, but would love to be a part of that, and just kind of shelling out some ideas of how we make that process um, more feasible, and just less of a headache for all parties involved. Um, Now, speaking of headaches, I think the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, as well as the New Orleans Saints fan base this year, have had their share of headaches. I mentioned that with quarterback or starting quarterback Derek Carr being injured again, dealing with a possible fracture in his non-throwing hand, his left hand, but also concussion. Hey, look, for what it's worth, to me, the guy made a hell of a play. You might have thought that it was unnecessary, but you're trying to win the game. You're trying to run out the clock, and at the very least, you gotta respect that, because had he, froze up and fell, or just kind of tiptoed out of bounds, guys would have been making their jokes about that, right? But the guy put his body on the line. I thought he got a first down. Let's just want to point that out. But playing against the New York Giants didn't look so well. Only scored 14 points the entire game, and we didn't look good. So I won't say it's not like Derek Carr was just lighting up the scoreboard before we got injured by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, the guy did put his body on the line to try to move the chains, help us close the game out, and unfortunately just landed wrong. All of his body weight landed on his left hand, and he also kind of landed on his face. So there was a level of concussion protocol we had to take as a team and a medical team. And obviously with his hand, he kind of was, what's the word? It's kind of slumping with it and just trying to like protect it in a way. They have announced him as week to week. Now, granted, it's offhand. I've seen Matthew Hasselback beat the New Orleans Saints with a bad hand on his offhand, right? So I mean, he could theoretically still play with that, put it on a glove, kind of, put a couple gloves on top of it, and he may be okay. But um, there's some financial implications involved, right, when it comes to Derek Carr. He's already, if I'm not mistaken, guaranteed to get $10 million, in the off season, and he has an injury clause. Shout out to his agent. This guy has to be one of the best in the business. Obviously, got the Saints to bid against themselves to sign Derek Carr in the first place. Got the guy a no trade clause, and got him an injury guarantee. And it doesn't go unnoticed to me that in his 2 years as the starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, he has had his share of injuries. Almost to the point where you're like, is he kind of maybe milking some of it just to make sure that if we ever do move off of him, he can claim that it's because of his injuries and that he will get a $30 million payday, which would be a $40 million payday when we think about his $10 million roster bonus, should he be still on the roster during the league year, which I believe begins March 1st, if I'm not mistaken. And so if he's injured and fails a physical the third day of the new league year, he gets $30 million. Now, somebody's going to have to budge on this. Like I mentioned, there was a report from ESPN that said Derek Carr had fractured his left hand. He was out for the season. Coach Rizzi in his press conference says he's dealing with a hand injury and some concussion symptoms. We're looking at that, and he is week to week. Now, we all know that if someone breaks their hand with 4 games left in the season, that they're done, right? Like we can kind of put that together and know that they're done. But why would the Saints send their coach out there to say, well, he's not necessarily done. He's week to week. He could come back next week, come back the week after, come back to season finale. Hell, if we run the table and make the playoffs, he could return for a postseason run. Why would the head coach keep that door open? And I think it's quite simple. It's the money. I think if you acknowledge the severity of Derek Carr's injury, I think if you further acknowledge it by putting him on injured reserve, which would end his season with 4 games left, I think you are acknowledging that it is a severe injury. It is something that will keep him out for a series of weeks. And again, if I am Derek Carr's agent, if I'm Derek Carr himself, I I'm slow walking it because the writing is on the wall with the New Orleans Saints and the Derek Carr relationship. Dennis Allen, who was the only reason why Derek Carr even entertained coming to the New Orleans Saints, let me make that clear. He's no longer here. He was fired earlier in the season, right? So the guy that he came here to play for is no longer here. Um, it's clear that the relationship hasn't and just what the Saints thought that they would be getting out of the Derek Carr experience has not worked out for either side. I would say that the Saints thought that they could have a guy who was a calming presence, a veteran quarterback, a guy that could take advantage of a really good defense that we had in tow and just win one of the easiest divisions in the NFL. And he wasn't able to do that. And I think to Derek's point, he probably thought that, hey, these are these weapons. I'm getting Chris Olave, I'm getting Michael Thomas, I'm getting Alvin Kamara. Um, I have a pretty decent offensive line, at least better than what I had in Vegas/Oakland. I should be fine. Or maybe thinking it was better than what he had, but we kind of knew the type of quarterback he was and what his deficiencies were as a quarterback in this league. And seeing what our team was made of, we knew that there were certain talent voids, and probably mostly at quarterback, but we didn't think he was the quarterback to um, what's the word I'm looking for? To elevate the guys around him. And we saw that there were some chemistry issues with the star weapons, and then not to mention we started getting hit with the injury bug. So while we haven't enjoyed the Derek Carr experience, I would be, I don't mind going on record and saying that. Hold on, yeah. Sorry about that. Had to close the door. But while we haven't as fans, and while I think the organization hasn't enjoyed the Derek Carr experience, I don't think Derek Carr has enjoyed the New Orleans Saints and Who That Nation experience. And so I can see both sides agreeing to part ways mutually, and him having a chance to be a bridge somewhere, and have another opportunity to be a starting quarterback in this league. And I think we move on, whether that's with Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler, who will have, we assume, the last 4 games to show something, whether that's to Coach Rizzy, who may have an opportunity to be the head coach, or if it's guys like Ben Johnson, or, excuse me, some people are saying Aaron Glenn. I don't know about that, but whoever our coach might be, maybe it might be Joe Brady, whoever it might be, it may be an opportunity for those guys to get more film, and they may be the guy that we say, okay, we can go into next season building around them at least a little bit. Maybe especially if you're not convinced or high on this 2025 quarterback class, and knowing that you're probably going to have a top 10 pick, but not a Shedeur Sanders level top pick. So who knows what the Saints might do, but I can see us moving on for the quarterback, and trying to find something new. But who's going to budge? This is the funny thing to me. Who's going to budge? Because clearly, I would assume that it was Derek Carr's agent or his circle that put out the severity of his injury. And again, for the coach to come out and say, "Oh, well, it's a week to week type of thing," who's going to be the first to budge? Because there is a lot of dollars and cents on the line for both parties, and the fact that Derek Carr has kind of been getting the upper hand so far, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets it again. But knowing the Saints, when they want to get out of something, they had no issues in being able to do that. I know what the cap says, that it would be lovely to keep him and restructure that contract again. But I think both parties are ready to move on, and that will be the case this upcoming offseason. So looking forward to that. But Derek, if I was you, I'm walking with a limp hand. You know, it could feel real good. But the second day of the first of the league year, right before that 12th hour, I'm hitting it on something, and they don't need to know. They don't have cameras around me. I'm gonna be like, man, it's the same injury I suffered versus New York. So it'd be interesting to see who budges first, because you kind of have two stubborn entities when it comes to the New Orleans Saints organization, most namely Mickey Loomis and what Derek Carr can be. So I'm interested to see who kind of gets the upper hand as we go to the offseason. And I do want to finish with the Saints quarterback situation. I would love to see Spencer Rattler get another shot. But at the same time, Jake Haener may be outperforming him in practice, and they may want to see what he has. I mean, granted, he's in year 2, just like Spencer is a rookie. So, you might want to say, hey, give Jake a shot. And if he shows some promise, give him the rest of the year, and you let the organization and potentially the new coach decide how they want to move forward with those two guys. And if neither one really shows anything, and you want to move off of Derek Carr, who's going to be 34, if I'm not mistaken, by the time the new season rolls around, April could be a perfect time to look for a quarterback. We talked about not being in the sweepstakes for Shedeur Sanders. I don't think you'd be in the sweepstakes for a Cam Ward, even though he's not a guy that I necessarily like a lot, but I do like him more than most. I do have him as the second quarterback behind Shedeur Sanders. So I do think he's the second best quarterback in this class, just given his experience playing college football. And so he's probably one of those guys that can come in and play well pretty soon. But I just think there's a certain ceiling that he'll have. And we'll get to that during, breakdowns of draft prospects. So I won't belabor you with all the details of how I feel about him as a prospect. But even when you get a guy like a Jalen Milroe, I know a lot of folks won't like that answer, but when you think of what the NFL is today and the dynamic ability that you want in the quarterback position, he's a guy that from what I know, a lot of coaches, a lot of aspiring head coaches who are coordinators on the offensive side of the ball in the NFL would love to work with him, and have an opportunity to mold him. And that's not saying he's going to be ready week one. He could be put in the fire week one, and you kind of utilize more so of his running ability a little bit more, and try to utilize the weapons on the perimeter. But I can see them making a move there, or let's say you like Jake or Spencer. Now you're using your top pick on some guys like a Luther Burden or a Ted McMillan, a Tyler Warren, guys, Ashton Genty. I mean, if he is available, guys that can come in and be dynamic players very early on, impact players for you at positions on the offensive end. Or you might want to go Mason Graham. You might want to go Will Johnson. I hear that name. I'm not sure about the cornerback position, but if people want to go a BPA and get the best corner in his draft, not named Travis Hunter, who's going to probably be the number one overall pick, Will Johnson is that guy. You can go Malachi Starks at safety. You can trade back, get a Jihad Campbell at linebacker. So the sky's the limit on what the Saints can do. But first and foremost, we have to figure out the quarterback position. And I think the first domino of Derek Carr has fallen. Now it's time to see, can Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler, can they show you something? If they can't show you something, then you're going to move on in a 2025 NFL draft. So I'm looking forward to the last few games of this year, and I'm looking forward to kind of how we navigate the offseason. Obviously, you got to figure out who's your head coach. I think it's going to say a lot about who we may bring in from a draft perspective, and the type of athletes we're going to bring into the organization, not just in the NFL draft, but also free agency. Because you got to think about it, sometimes these guys are coming from different teams, and they're familiar with certain athletes throughout their different stops in their career, guys that know their system, guys that know the culture that they want to instill. And those can be guys that get added to the Saints locker room. And so I'm excited about it all. And I think Saints fans, you guys should be too. I know this season has sucked, and believe me, it has sucked to the highest degree. But there's a lot to play for. Some people may say that's the playoffs. I'm not talking about that. I think it's a lot to play for in terms of talent evaluation, assessing what we need, um, putting some things on tape that attract some of the top head coach candidates, and them saying, hey, I want to be able to coach certain guys, but also bring some of my guys in and make some magic happen. And obviously who we're bringing in from the collegiate level to help our team get better. So that's what I am excited about going forward. So that is today's show. Really enjoyed kind of talking about a little bit of everything college, the pros, the transfer portal, the spooky transfer portal, which I think if we get some systems in place, we can make that a very seamless process for coaches, but in my opinion, most importantly, the student athletes and their families. So look, if I offended anyone, it's a good thing, right? It's an opportunity for me to learn, and it's an opportunity for you to teach me. All I ask is that you keep it respectful. Peace.